Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Let's go over to the CBN newsroom for today's top stories.
Thanks, Gordon. Jimmy Carter, the nation's longest living president and Nobel Peace Prize winner, has died at age 100. Carter helped the nation recover from an unprecedented government scandal, and he brokered a historic peace deal between Israel and Egypt. Yet a sick economy and foreign policy failures limited him to one term. A man of Christian faith, he might be best remembered for his years of service after he left the White House. Jennifer Wishon looks back on his life and legacy.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute.
When he took the oath of office in 1977, James Earl Carter Jr. brought a breath of fresh air to Washington. A Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher and peanut farmer, the Georgia governor came from nowhere in 1976 to defeat President Gerald Ford.
Good evening. President Nixon reportedly will announce his resignation tonight.
Almost overnight, scandal-weary Americans could put Watergate and the Nixon-Ford years behind them. At home, the Carter years saw the dawn of disco. And overseas, the promise of a vigorous new pope from Poland, John Paul II. With Carter, many evangelicals were thrilled one of their own made it to the White House. He spoke their language, and there was real hope he could turn the country around. Before the '76 election, he talked to CBN founder Pat Robertson.
My faith in Christ has grown with age and with responsibility.
As president, he faced a world full of danger. The Soviet communist menace lurked on every continent.
The number killed in Tehran since the beginning of the month is probably well over 100.
In Iran, more trouble. A revolution led by an obscure cleric, the Ayatollah Khomeini, turned the country upside down. Suddenly, an ally became an enemy. And in November 1979, Khomeini's followers took 52 Americans hostage. A failed rescue attempt ended in the deaths of 8 U.S. servicemen. Critics say Carter's Iran legacy continues to haunt us today.
Building, building, building. Skyscrapers.
While elected to control surging inflation at home, it grew even more during his term as interest rates soared and Americans lost jobs.
The erosion of our confidence in the future.
In the summer of '79, he made his famous malaise speech, in which he seemed to blame the country's problems on the American people.
It is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will.
The terrible economy haunted the president's re-election campaign. He was challenged by Republican Ronald Reagan, who told Americans it was time to change leaders.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
But as a former president, he drew admiration for his work championing human rights and charitable causes like Habitat for Humanity.
The world found out about Habitat in 1984 when President Carter and Mrs. Carter rode a bus up from Plains, Georgia to New York City and spent a week sleeping in a church basement and rehabbing a tenement building on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And no one had ever seen a former president of the United States behaving this way.
Carter told Gordon Robertson it was his way of putting his faith into action.
I think it's important for us to actually do things to demonstrate our belief, as Jesus did his whole life. He didn't just preach. You know, his life was devoted to reaching out to the leper, who would be the AIDS victim nowadays, right, or to those who were in prison, or those who were poverty-stricken, or who had a different color skin, like the Samaritans, as you know, or who were sinners.
The 39th president was happily married to his wife Rosalind for 77 years. The former First Lady, a respected advocate for mental health and human rights, died at age 96 at home in Georgia alongside her husband. Carter was in hospice care when his wife died. Nearly 10 years prior, he defied odds, beating a grim cancer diagnosis. Melanoma had spread to his brain and liver, but just months later, after surgery, radiation, and immunotherapy treatments, he announced he was cancer-free.
So a lot of people prayed for me, and I appreciate that.
Throughout all the battles he faced in life, Carter leaned heavily on his faith.
I think I've ever been as blessed as any human being in the world.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Nice tribute. Thanks, Jennifer. Well, President Joe Biden has called for a national day of mourning for President Carter on January 9th. Last night, he offered words of praise for his longtime friend.
Today, America and the world, in my view, lost a remarkable leader. He was a statesman and humanitarian. And Jill and I lost a dear friend.
President-elect Trump honored former President Carter with these words on Truth Social. He did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. Evangelist Franklin Graham expressed appreciation for President Carter's attendance at the opening of the Billy Graham Library in Charlotte in 2007, posting on Facebook, quote, "He and my father, Billy Graham, had a close relationship. I know that his family would appreciate your prayers." Well, turning to the rare and dangerous weather this weekend, tornadoes across the South killed at least 4 people. More than 35 twisters were reported across 6 states. Close to a dozen hit the Houston area, damaging about 300 structures and putting several people in the hospital. In Mississippi, 3 trees fell onto Mike Carroll's home.
Somebody was taking care of me, all I'm saying. But yeah, we're fine.
God bless him. Well, in Jackson County, Mississippi, several people had to be rescued from their homes because of flooding. Overseas in South Korea now, investigators looking for answers in the plane crash that left at least 179 people dead. The plane seen here skidding on its belly along the runway at high speed with no landing gear. It hit a wall and explodes into flames. Only 2 people survived. The tower warned of a bird strike right before the crew declared an emergency. Turning now to the impact of the civil war that's ravaged the Asian nation of Myanmar. More than 3 million people have fled their homes in recent years. CBN's Lucille Toulousan shows us how an American volunteer is helping some children overcome their trauma.
After escaping war-torn Myanmar, children find refuge attending the Sunday school in this Burmese Christian church.
These children are singing about Noah's Ark, that all the animals in Noah's Ark love each other. The cat and the mouse don't hate each other. It is a strong message to be heard across Myanmar for the fighting to stop and for the people to love one another, just like the animals in Noah's Ark.
American Jeffrey McConnell volunteers here on weekends to teach the Bible, English, and social skills. During the week, he teaches in a Christian school where most students are refugees. McConnell tells CBN News how they share heartbreaking stories about Myanmar's military, the Tatmadaws' brutality against their families.
She was Karen, and her father, a worker for the resistance, you know, the fact that he had defended his family and his people against the Tatmadaw, against their atrocities, that he was wanted for murder. And so when the Tatmadaw came into the village, you know, they said, this man is guilty of murder and we will execute him. And when they asked for a final request, he said, I would like to see my daughter. And so they brought the daughter to him, and she held his hand, and he was executed.
Filled with compassion towards these suffering children, McConnell regularly treats them to fun activities. On this particular holiday, he took them to a nearby stream for a swim.
They feel good about themselves. And this, in contrast, as so many people tend to see them as, oh, they are the poor little refugee children, you know, I want the world to know, no, these are children and they have the same hopes and dreams that all children have. And in that sense, we want to fulfill those hopes and dreams.
McConnell also helped enroll Ruth, one of the refugees, in the school where he teaches.
She's got so many leadership qualities. If she finishes our program, then there's a very good opportunity. She could possibly be scholarship to a Bible college in Australia or in the United States.
In Myanmar, we were very poor. We struggled to be able to eat one meal each day. We did not get good education. Here, the pastor shared about Jesus. And after we received Jesus, Ruth was born. I believe God will give Ruth an excellent life.
I thank Jesus. I study, pay to translator.
When I see these children in eternity, we will rejoice together. I'm always a little bit surprised when people say, Teacher Jeff, you're doing so much for them. They're doing just as much for me. Their precious little smiles, their hugs, their friendship. This is the day that the Lord has made.
Lucille Telusan, CBN News, Mesot, Thailand.
Thanks, Lucille.